All right, it's 3 o'clock. It is Wednesday, February 17th. Lynn Becker, CEO and founder of Power of Patience. I already got one thumbs up from Mel. We are recording this. So if everybody can give me a thumbs up or a yay so we can let others see this. Awesome. Yay. All right, I have two dynamic ladies here today for our very first of the 2021 series of our webinar series. It's Take Two series, which is sponsored by Power of Patience. Take two because it takes two people at least to get through a brain injury. And it's your second take on life, and that's okay. We're going to celebrate that. So with no further ado, we're going to get into what neuromusic therapy is all about. But let me give a little quick intro of the bio and the backgrounds before our two guests. Caitlin Hebb, if she can give us a little wave. She's over there in the corner. She is the clinical operations manager with Med Rhythms. She graduated from Berklee College of Music up in Boston. She has a degree in music therapy. She received her fellowship in neurological music therapy from the Academy of Neurological Music Therapy, and she has done the internship directors for Med Rhythms, which is within the Spalding Rehab Hospital, where she primarily works. And if I mess something up, feel free to correct me, ladies. All right. She has been involved with creating all sorts of new and national conferences. Even in the Boston area, she travels between research, clinical initiatives, and education within the music space. She's a part of the aphasia community chorus as well, and in the New England American Music Therapy Association. I can't keep going on. You just got to read her bio. It's amazing. It's like, wow, like you have a rock star number 1 and 2 here. Number 2, our other Caitlin, as I said, Caitlin Sells. She is also a board certified music therapist in the Boston area. But you have to remember, you can do stuff via telehealth nowadays. So you don't have to just think this is only for Boston. She's graduated from the Berklee College of Music as well. Her degrees in music therapy and psychology, which is really super interesting, and did her fellowship through Upbeat Music Therapy in the Franciscan Children's Hospital. After she graduated, she started working with the Brookline Music School as a music therapist, and she is still there today. She is a big advocate for the field of music therapy within conferences, webinars, and keynotes, and she is the next vice president for the New England region of the American Music Therapy Association. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome our guests. Ladies, we are so happy to have you here. Take it away.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
There we go. Excellent. All right. And everyone can hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am.
If the sound gets a little wonky, let me know. I've actually had some clients say that it's gotten a little funky here and there, so I will adjust it as needed. Thank you for the introduction, Lynn. My name is Kathleen Sell. I am a board certified music therapist. I'm presenting today with my colleague, Caitlin Hebb. And we're going to discuss music therapy as a field, but more specifically, neurologic music therapy. And neurologic music therapy is sort of a smaller portion of music therapy as a whole that helps to address traumatic brain injuries. So we will, can I change? There we go. All right, so to start, just sort of the generic, what is music therapy? So music therapy is a clinical and goal-oriented, evidence-based use of music through structured activities to address non-musical and musical goals. It creates a non-threatening environment to work towards client goals and can be tracked through continuous documentation. And music is chosen based off of client preferences and can be adjusted to meet clients' needs. So that's sort of the textbook definition of what we're talking about today. That's a definition that you can find on the American Music Therapy Association's website. But if you think about, one of my favorite ways of describing music therapy is that motivation you may get when you are working out and you need to do some exercises. Do you work out in silence or do you put some music on to pump you up? You're using music as a way to give you energy and to give you focus to get through that workout. So that's one of my sort of generic examples of music therapy. Now, more specifically, what is neurologic music therapy? It's a smaller section of music therapy that we'll talk about today. Neurologic music therapy is a research-based system of standardized clinical techniques for sensory motor training, speech and language training, and cognitive training. Its treatment techniques are based on the scientific knowledge in music perception and production and the effects thereof on non-musical brain and behavior functions. So again, a very textbook definition. But this is how this portion of music therapy is more specific towards how music is perceived in the brain and how we might be able to use that to help heal or rehabilitate brain injuries. And let me click here. There we go. All right, so this is just a brief list of some of the populations that music therapists might work with. I personally work a lot in special education, so I work a lot with children on the autism spectrum. I've also been working a lot with older adults who have Alzheimer's and dementia.
Everyone shut up. Everyone.
And some of the other populations that music therapists might work with are in mental health or psychiatric populations. They may work with veterans and folks who are in the military, in correctional and forensic settings. And then also acquired brain injuries or TBIs, strokes, brain tumors, etc. Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, ALS, spinal cord injuries. So the list goes on. This is just a small list of who a music therapist might work with. All right, and let me click, and I'm going to pass it to Caitlin.
Yeah. Thank you. So the idea of this neurologic music therapy being kind of a subset of music therapy and really focusing on, like Kathleen said, these specific domains that we operate in. So you can see here on the slide, there's quite a few goal areas that we might address within these different sensory motor, cognition, and speech and language. For the purpose of today's presentation, just because we don't have all the time in the world, we're going to focus on sensory motor and speech and language and show some videos of what that might look like. But the real focus is on using music as a way to improve things like walking and talking, right? So the shift and why neurologic music therapy came to be was because they started to be able to actually do fMRI imaging and see where music was being processed in the brain. And what they found was that music has this widespread activation, really like no other stimulus. And if you actually think about in your life, and maybe someone can, unmute and kind of give some examples, but in your life, how do you use music? Right? You might be using it, like Kathleen said, in a sense of a playlist. Stephen, I see you have, yes. How do you use it?
Exercise, In my early recovery, I used one particular song to help motivate me to walk. Was Eye of the Tiger,
Yes, love that.
Oh,
That's
great.
gotta be the best motivator out there,
Yeah, so exactly. And that kind of brings in not only the physical component, but also you said motivation, right? That's that music
Yes.
has a lot of salience. It has a lot of weight to it that we can actually harness and use to produce better functional outcomes for things like walking.
Lynn, can
Karen,
I
see
ask
you.
a quick question? It's Lynn, because when I'm writing and I'm developing and designing things, I get so much more motivated with music in the background. And, more recently it's country music. I don't know why, but and I don't have a brain injury, but, how does that help? So it sounds like it helps anybody.
Yeah. So, I think, motivate, it can. I tend to joke in a sense when I say these presentations, because we list off like populations that we work with, but I usually joke and say like, we work with anyone who has a brain, I think that these principles apply to pretty much, even if you think about sports medicine, right? A lot of people like rowers, for example, use elements of music. They're using a rhythmic component because it helps with the consistency and the like regulation and motor planning of the movements. So I don't think that there's a limit on who this could apply to. I think from a clinical perspective, that clinical translation, it's how can we harness this impact that music is making on functional outcomes.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the most important parts and that I think we have studied in music in the brain is really rhythm. So, for example, if I would, well, not for example, let's do an example. If I was to say, I'm going to play a song and I want you all to try to move to the beat that I see. I see some of you on screen, so I'm specifically looking at you, but I'm going to play a song and I want you to try to move to that beat, okay? You ready? You all ready? Let's do it. Well, I guess you'd say, what can make me feel this way? My girl. Yeah, you all have a great sense of rhythm, right? So just that like brief example, what you can see is that basically you're able to listen to that song, that beat, line up your body and kind of move with that beat. And what we found is that is actually kind of across the board what most humans are capable of doing. And we call that rhythmic entrainment. So it's kind of a fancy word of saying you have this auditory stimulus, like a metronome or a song that you like, and you're lining up your movements to that beat, right? And able to kind of perceive and really move with the rhythm. So how do we actually translate that is kind of the question, right? How do we actually use that for individuals who have experienced a brain injury? And this phenomenon or this ability still exists and still can be used to help with recovery. And so we'll go ahead, we'll move in to talk about how we use that. Actually, Kathleen, let's maybe go to sensory first, or sensory motor first. I think speech and language is up first, but we'll go to the next slide and go back.
Oh, it wants me to click through all of the videos. Sorry, y'all.
Oh, that's okay.
It's very picky. There we go.
So we'll talk about kind of the easiest translation of this. And that's to the first way that we've translated using a beat is for the recovery of walking. And that's because that is a huge importance, especially early on, as some of you might have experienced within your rehabilitation and your recovery. A lot of it is focused on, can you walk safely and to the, independence level that is safe, right? And so when you think about walking, it is inherently naturally rhythmic. I don't know if you've ever been in a grocery store where you've heard a woman with high heels on and it's clicking, that click, click, click. Obviously right now we're restricted in a sense, but if you've experienced that before, you can look around and people actually start to line up with that high heel clicking, and it produces kind of that metronome. So walking in and of itself is naturally rhythmic. And what we're going to do is show you a video of a couple of interventions that we use. One of them is called rhythmic auditory stimulation. The names don't really matter, is what I'll say. I'll say the names, but they don't really matter. You'll see it in the video. Rhythmic auditory stimulation, pattern sensory enhancement, and then therapeutic instrumental music performance. And all of these interventions are focused on using rhythm and music as a way to improve a motor recovery. And so we'll go ahead and show this video now. This is of an individual who sustained a traumatic brain injury from a car accident. Her name is Mia, and I got to work with her actually at Spalding. So it just says Mia was in a car accident and suffered from a traumatic brain injury, leaving her with the inability to walk. So you can, I wonder if there's a way to make this a little bit bigger, Kathleen. Could you?
I can full screen.
Yeah, let's full screen. So these are the interventions, as I mentioned before, and this was her first time walking with us. There's a little bit of a delay on the video, but you'll be able to see it.
What I'll do is I'll stop sharing sound and I'll turn up my, there we go. Perfect. I'm going to turn up my speaker.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Sorry about that. Here we go.
Oh, that's okay.
Better?
So this is her the second time, or after a couple times of working with her, where she has a little bit more independence, more control.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty impressive. And then we speed her up. And then as she kind of improved, we threw out like harder exercises, basically. And then this was the last session we had with her.
This is amazing.
Yes. So you can kind of see in here the pretty significant difference of when she first came to when she ended with us.
And Caitlin, how long was that for her?
Yeah, so she was with us for actually kind of an atypical length of time at an inpatient rehab facility. She was with us for 6 weeks, whereas typically, you know, you get 2.5 maybe if depending on insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So we were lucky because she was young and was making quite a bit of improvement. She was able to kind of extend her stay with us, and so we got to see her for that full length. We saw her at least 2 to 3 times a week within her treatment there at Spalding, and saw some of the biggest moments of growth within her walking was actually within our sessions, and we were lucky to kind of capture that within film. Just again, kind of you can see she's walking to the beat, and it's really helping map out her movements so that it can really optimize and be more efficient at walking.
That's incredible. I mean, you mentioned the efficiency, and I can assure you, while she started at a much more difficult level than my daughter started at, her progress was so fast in comparison to my daughter's without any music. And that metronome, I recognized the sound and the word. And I remember it was challenging for her, and it was a year of her therapy. And so you're telling me in 6 weeks, and my daughter is probably a little bit better than where your patient is at 6 weeks. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, this is kind of, it's definitely dependent, right? I mean, every brain injury is different. Every person's experience is so different. And so I think that is, you know, something, what's great is that we can use this standardized intervention. We can use the structure of it. However, every person, it's going to be individualized for that person. And so, you know, we line ourselves very much with the other disciplines in a sense of that, you know, you're probably going to hear from me that intensity of your programs, intensity of therapy truly matters for neuroplasticity and that recovery process. But I don't think it matters. It doesn't matter at what stage, right? You could be 5 years post your TBI and still make improvements and still kind of work through that. It's just the timing of your program and all of that can fluctuate. But I would say, you know, with her 6 weeks, we saw this, you know, transformation, and sometimes it takes longer, but sometimes it takes less. So it definitely is dependent on the person. Yeah. So what you also saw in that video is there were a couple of bells that she was stepping on and a hi-hat, an instrument she was stepping on. And so what's great about implementing, music and instruments is that we talked a little bit about that metronome and that feed forward. That's kind of that feed forward entrainment. It's telling your body when to move. But oftentimes we use instruments to give a feedback, right? So you can actually hear when you've achieved the movement that we're looking to work on. So if you're working on, kicking your leg out for that knee extension, you can actually put a tambourine at the end of that movement and give yourself a little bit of feedback so that you can hear. You have the rhythm that's telling you when to move, and you have the instrument telling you, yes, you've reached that movement. So it's a really good way to reinforce and to provide the auditory feedback that you saw. She was stepping on the bells, and we were kind of working on balance within that exercise, and also that single leg stance, so really standing on one foot for a good amount of time. And so what helped most with the foot clearance issue was actually those bells are, in my opinion, there was probably the biggest change. The other hi-hat that you saw to me is more for that heel to toe, that dorsiflexion, plantar flexion movement that you're going to be working on, which is really important for walking. But I think as far as foot clearance, those bells are probably what did the trick for that, because it is pretty close to the length of a step, actually. So if you think about kind of translating that into your everyday life, you might actually have kind of that distance you might need to travel to lift your foot up onto a step. So we kind of did that in simulation of that exercise as well. How are we doing on time? Should we switch over to speech and language?
It's 3:21. So maybe switch over, because I have some questions also that I'd like to ask you guys too.
Okay, wonderful. So then the next area that we address and that we're going to talk about today is similarly, how are we using its elements of rhythm and melody, but to focus more on speech. So from a brain injury, and I'm sure you guys, some of you have experienced where you might have, depending on the location of the injury, might have difficulty with things like getting language out, articulation, if you've had any weakness within your lips, that the oral motor and even the motor planning, the oral motor planning, and even some respiratory difficulties, right? So respiratory strength, and that translates to your voice, which affects your overall communication, right? So these are areas that we might address and use music, and have seen where music can be really impactful to help with that. So because music has this widespread activation, it actually shares a lot of the same connections in your brain as your speech and language centers in your brain. So it can really help kind of rewire and give a new route for your brain to help with those goals. I'm going to show you this. The first video is an example of an individual who has aphasia and also apraxia, actually. And it's basically using an intervention called melodic intonation therapy that helps with the overall communication. So you'll see, and we can talk about it a little afterwards.
There we go.
There we go.
Try it again.
So you can see he has pretty difficulty communicating, but he knows what he wants to say. He just can't say it himself.
I'm Peter. I'm Peter. I'm Peter. How are you? How are you?
And this is after 6 months of seeing him twice a week for an hour and a half each session.
Hello, I'm Peter. How are you? I am good. Thank you. How are you?
And his singing too.
Are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray.
So you can see kind of a pretty big difference, not only in his ability to say those functional phrases, which might seem small, but for him was a really big deal to be able to introduce himself as, and be able to communicate that. And then you also kind of saw the transformation in his singing, where he was able to actually access more language and sing more of those words.
I have chills. That is just so amazing.
Yeah.
So what about, let me ask, because, in Peter's case, he was very severe. And, I'm thinking of some of the patients that I've actually had chances to speak with, within our dashboard. And I would love to start a GoFundMe to help this one gentleman in particular, because he has had some speech therapy, but not enough. And his brain is going so fast. And they did a documentary on him. But what happens is he's going nice and even. And then all of a sudden, because he gets so excited to say more, his words can't keep up. So how would you help somebody in that capacity?
Well, I think that's kind of where these external cueing comes into play. So that that metronome component, the structure within a familiar song, where I often find that it's a natural pacing mechanism for an individual, and a good environment where you can structure and kind of focus more on the pacing component. So actually what you saw in this video, that I'm Peter, right? You're right in a sense that that's more extreme, but the next level to that is actually taking the melody out of it and doing more of like a rhythmic speaking. Like, I'm going to go to the store today, but you're basically putting the parameters around. And so I would say for that person, like if I was working with them, I might actually slow their pace down a bit to focus on things like articulation and overall intelligibility of speech. So I think it's just kind of how you're implementing the rhythm and the melody might be a little bit different.
Okay, so now of course, I have to ask the next question, which is going to be, we all know in the brain injury community that often it's a shoot from the hip approach, right? Not one doctor follows the same protocol as another doctor. And we know that we need way more research, right? And that's the goal of what we're doing with Power of Patients, not just to empower our patients, but to really reshape clinical trials. So is there something, as a community of TBI and stroke and brain injury people that are here today, should look for? Like, both of your accreditations are amazing. I didn't know about this, right? So I would have certainly looked for something like this for my daughter to help her. So what should we look for when we want help like this?
Yeah, so this is where what Kathleen was kind of referring to is that neurologic music therapy being kind of a subset, a model of music therapy that really specializes in implementing these interventions. And not to say that other music therapists don't work within these domains, because they do, but I think that's kind of the difference of, this structure, this research-based practice that as a field overall largely began in the 1990s, has since grown with the literature to support the interventions that are currently being employed. So I think you could, narrow it in a sense to say that neuromusic therapy is probably going to be a more direct path to work on these specific things and have interventions. And then beyond that, I would say really just engaging in music in general, I think is going to be beneficial for anyone, right? There's a famous quote by actually the founder of NMT who said, a brain that engages in music is changed by music. And, that is something that I think, regardless of whatever your level, your capacity in a sense of engaging, it's important to engage in music and use music in whatever way that you can.
That's awesome. So I have to now kind of jump in a little bit too for our, yay, well said. So I attended a pediatric stroke conference, and a Harvard physician finished the end of the presentation, because everybody's presentation was, we just don't know, right? It's the same story we all hear. But he ended it with, which is, I think, what I was so happy to find both of you, was like, there's music therapy. It has compelling evidence. We don't know what is happening, but we need to really look at it so much more intently. And I reflected upon my work with the TBI portal for the US government and their soldiers. And I remember they had music therapy there. And I remember I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know how to explore that data on the clinical aspect for analysis. But after I met Kathleen and I got to see, and she showed me things, I'm like, I'm so hooked. Like, I want music therapy, right? I mean, make me better. So and one of the things that struck me also is when I showed her our dashboard, which, I hope everybody gets on to do this. Kathleen showed me that our goal setting, how you guys work with other therapists. And so to create really truly goals that can be measured by your symptoms on the dashboard, can you just kind of illuminate us about how should we maybe use that as a tool to help?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, from, my understanding of the literature and where neuroplasticity rehabilitation is headed, right, is actually that more and more is coming out about understanding. I think we went into this field of healthcare and we, at first it was broad and then it got super specialized, right? So it's like, I do just this particular type of work. And now it's kind of going back a little bit of saying like, oh no, actually this interprofessional, this interdisciplinary approach is actually the most effective. Even though we have specialties, it's the most effective to be working together, which makes sense, right? I mean, I think it's kind of, we wait for research to tell us the logical conclusions, right? That we kind of know. And I think that, now we're finding that even beyond working with two specialties, but working within two modalities. So doing a walking training while also doing a cognitive task is going to overall produce better outcomes than just purely doing a cognitive task and a walking task. And so I think it's, in regards to the portal, and maybe Kathleen, you can add to this because I have just briefly seen the actual portal in a sense, but I think that for tracking outcomes, it seems like, realistically, you want to kind of incorporate as many modalities as you could to produce the best outcomes. Kathleen, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of the experiences that I've had in the field in the last couple of years has been that I'm trying to see what other clinicians are doing and how music can support that. That the goals that people will have in other modalities really help inform what we should try and tackle in music. And then music also has a bit more person-centered approach. How can we do something that's also very enjoyable so it doesn't feel like work all the time? Can we do something with someone's favorite song? Can we do some of these interventions with someone's favorite song and make it just a little bit more enjoyable and bring that emotional aspect into it as well?
That's perfect. And you actually said, you echoed what one of the vision therapy doctors that we work with and had her also helping with our neurooptometry sessions. And she had said, I want to see what all the other therapists do, because this is the only way vision stimuli can improve. So, I mean, to both of your points, thank you so much for saying that we are not isolated. We have to address the mind, body, spirit as a whole, right? And that is so important. There were two really good questions. One is, will it help with 30 years post spastic paralysis? And one is good information, gotta go, thank you very much. And if you could speak briefly on this question, cognitive rehab, what specific activities and the MMT, music, I think it's music therapy.
Music mnemonics training and music executive functioning. Who is that?
Thank you.
How do you know how that's
Daniel? Daniel's a rock star.
Okay.
Hi, Daniel.
That's funny. I'm like, those are very specific NMT techniques. But yes. Okay. Well, I can address the first question, the spastic paralysis. And then we can jump into your question, Daniel, a little bit too. But so with spasticity, I would say, the approach that we commonly take is more in regards to, the best way to combat tone and to combat that spasticity response with the paralysis is actually through strength training. And really kind of oftentimes what I'll do is build a rhythmic and, music environment that is focused on a particular muscle component. So, let's say it's that you have spasticity within your lower, like within your quads, and it's activated as you kind of go faster. Well, then I might actually work on strength training by doing kind of an isolated movement, building up that muscle. That way it can help kind of mitigate some of the spasticity that you're experiencing. It's not necessarily going to completely resolve the spasticity. It takes time. And that's kind of that anytime you introduce strength or endurance training, it's going to take a lot of repetition, a lot of time, and consistency within that program. Definitely something we have worked on, though I think in regards to the RAS, like what you saw, that rhythmic auditory stimulation or the walking, it would be a different approach, right? I might not necessarily speed you up so quickly because that's when your spasticity is going to kick in. I might actually slow you down and work on the single leg stance, increasing strength and balance. Does that help answer your question, Stephen? You can put in the chat if that was helpful. And then Daniel, I don't know, Kathleen, if you want to talk to any.
Do you need to see the question again? Yeah.
See if there's time. Oh yeah. Within the music mnemonics and executive functioning cognitive rehab. So these specific activities for training, which I have actually delivered online. So this is kind of the interesting, as we shifted to telehealth, our typical way of implementing exercises totally changed. But with music mnemonics, that's actually pretty easy. So music mnemonics, we didn't touch on it. So for those that are, tuning in, this is more of, if you've ever heard of the best way to describe it is kind of those jingles that are commonly used in marketing, where I'd be like, the best part of waking up is
Folgers in your cup.
Exactly. Right. So like, although I strongly disagree with that statement, I will say that, Folgers being the best, but what they found through marketing and through the use of these jingles and music was that it really helps kind of stick and help with the recall of information, right? So oftentimes what we will do is we actually will create our own melody, our own kind of catchy melody with information that you want to recall, not necessarily information that we're trying to sell you, right? So, I've used this in the capacity of saying levels of orientation. So, in the hospital, it's more focused like you're at Spalding Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, or it might be that, I'm here today. And then you kind of insert like where you are in a sense, as well as I've used it commonly to help with names, like names of loved ones. I've used it for special dates that are coming up in people's lives. So it's basically what you do is you essentially create a jingle that you associate with information you need to recall. You practice it a good amount of time, but the music environment helps you recall that information a lot quicker than just thinking about it or speaking to it, if that makes sense.
Because you're reminding me of, tricks my elementary school teacher would teach us, right? You make a rhyme out of whatever the first letter is of something. And, I have a crazy digit pattern memory. Like I can close my eyes and I can repeat a phone number in the air, or I do math in the air. But when it comes to memorization and names and things like that, I'm definitely more on that math side as opposed to speech, etc. And so these tricks really, really did help me. So I have to ask, I know there's one more question, Rockstar. Yes, you are, Dr. Daniel. Daniel is really totally awesome. Here's something. So two things. When, again, in rehab with one of the therapists for my daughter, and I do have to tell you, even though we didn't, again, in Charleston, didn't have the Spalding or even the repertoire of the doctors that even some of you have access to, right? So I'm right in your boat, right? We didn't have the good therapists and the good access. But I came across a gentleman that was our best efforts in her rehab were in the stroke clinic. And he was doing a rock steady program. And I know we're over time, so if people have to leave, it's certainly fine, but this will be up. But Rock Steady, as I believe, was designed for people with Parkinson's. However, he did it with my daughter. And so he had little triangles, you know, not necessarily bells and things like that. So he did it so that she could start to have balance, right? Because of her listing and she can't walk straight and so on and so forth. So do you guys there's no music, it's just pattern behavior. So, you know, I'm now thinking in clinical trials because my goal is to increase clinical trials in this space. And a company came to me and said, I have a gait analyzer. I want to run a clinical trial. And I said, I have people. Okay, what do we want to do? Right. And so is there a way to combine this gait analyzer, which measures the whole vestibular system, the bottom of the feet, the inner ear, and what you're seeing with music therapy? Is there something that you can do like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. If you've got the technology and the way to measure, I think that's kind of, you know, I think the research is headed in that way where they're using more of like motion analysis labs, right? Where they're trying to measure kind of that capacity of movement and how is rhythm lining up and in what way, like, is it affecting our cadence, our balance, the like overall VO2 max, right? They're looking at energy efficiency. So I think if you had, you know, that type of technology to partner with, they've done some where it's like the motion analysis with certain movements. So maybe it's for a hemiparetic arm, or maybe it's for, you know, ataxia, that coordination deficit. So maybe it's you're basically kind of using an external cue in addition to the sensory component that you're getting, the spatial and temporal data that you're getting from those devices to see if the movements are more efficient or improving kind of that energy component. And so I think what you'll find is the answer is probably yes, but we're always looking for ways to actually have tangible data that is supporting that, right? And here is very clear clinical evidence that this is improving and maximizing the function.
Okay, that's so exciting. So let me just check on the chat. Presentation is amazing. I suffered a prenatal stroke and to be a senior in college. That is amazing. Good for you.
Yeah,
back to the therapy question about MMT, MACT. What would be a good recommendation for homework exercises to assist in program intensity?
That is a great question. I'm so glad you're asking that too, because program intensity is really what I think makes a huge difference here. So what I would say is a good exercise, right? We have access to music, whether, you know, whatever way, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, whatever it is. A great way to incorporate and kind of start with maybe like an attention exercise that I would say is pick a song that you like for example, I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles, and pick a word, right, that you can focus on. And do things like count the amount of times that you hear that word within the song. And, you know, that could be something that's very easy to do. Another way, like regarding the music mnemonics that you could try is actually find out, you know, identify what would be really helpful to remember. Write it down, and then you might turn on a song that you actually don't know that well and kind of steal the melody in a sense, to help and then put what you wrote down kind of in the context of that song. So like if I meet someone for the first time, like Lynn, you know, like I might say like, I met Lynn today, if I needed to remember her name, right? As a musician, that's pretty easy for me to come up with. For you, you might use things that are, you know, already pre-recorded in a way to just like people steal melodies all the time. So steal someone else's melody and put your own words to it. That's totally fine. So I would say, you know, that could be a way that you could start incorporating that in your everyday life. Also, if you have instruments at home and you're not using them, that's a really good way to kind of incorporate even learning an instrument or music training in any capacity. Learn what the notes are, learn what a scale is. It's a good attention exercise that you can start on your own.
That's awesome. So we have a question from Allison. Do you all treat via telehealth? And I think both of them do. And Allison and everyone else, I will be sharing Caitlin and Caitlin Squared contact info to you all. So you are very welcome, Brianna. There was another question. It's not the close, because we can keep going as long as our guests are able to keep going. So we know that Rocksteady works. We know that we're going to look for anecdotal evidence. We know that there is absolutely compelling evidence. I myself have heard it from the Harvard guys, right? So as a voice, as collectively, I think we need to do this. And if you start ramping up your intensity of your stuff, even on your own, I know that what we're doing for you on the dashboard is going to help you refine that recovery process. So if you haven't done it, please sign up and just tell us what you think, because I make it better for you once I hear. But this is for both of our Caitlins. What are your favorite songs? Like, how is not somebody asking that in the chat?
Kathleen, do you want to start?
Sure. I love this one very cheesy Paul McCartney song called Coming Up. And if you watch the music video, it's just him like duplicated over and over again, playing all the different instruments, and it cracks me up. I don't know why. It's just, I love that song, and it always puts me in a good mood, and it's just a song that I hold close to me and can use that to get ready for a workout or get ready for a presentation or get ready in the morning. And yeah, that's my go-to.
That's awesome. Thank you. Caitlin?
This is really hard. I'm actually a very decisive person, except for when it comes to music. So I would say that I really like, I fall more into the soul and Motown. If I could like live in a musical genre, it would probably be Motown. So I'm going to say that anything by Benny King, like Stand By Me, or I Feel Good, James Brown, like that's my, like, I'll sit in that all day.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, let me just check the chat. Guitar lessons. Does anyone give guitar lessons for music therapy?
Definitely.
Go ahead, Kathleen, if you want.
I definitely do guitar lessons. I especially when we were in person, half of my sessions were adapted lessons, and they're adapted to fit the needs of my clients. And so some clients may have low finger dexterity, so I'm going to adapt to the guitar to make it easier for them. Some folks may just learn at a slower pace, and so we'll do standard guitar lessons, but go at the pace that works best for them. Perhaps learn things a little out of order from traditional music lessons, but absolutely, yeah. Learning an instrument, learning guitar is definitely still music therapy.
That's awesome. All right, so her contact will be there. The songs in the first video with patient Maria were helpful. They seem to be minor tones. She would like to hear that again. Is that video alone by itself available?
Yeah, you can actually, I believe that one we've put on MedRhythm's website, and I also believe it's on YouTube. So I think you can find it on both platforms, YouTube, and I do actually think she was a big R&B fan, and I think that was an R&B song, which is very commonly in a minor key. So you're probably right.
Okay. Daniel looks like he found it already. See, Daniel, I told you he was iconic. So, all right. So now we know your favorite songs. We know how well this really will help people, and it puts you in a good mood. Like I'm in a good mood, right? Like I'm just in a good mood talking about music. Are there any, hang on. Because for a person wishing to become a music therapist, how much schooling is required, and do you receive the degree in music? Do you have to receive a degree in music therapy?
Yes. So myself and Caitlin both graduated from the Berklee College of Music. There are a lot of programs that specialize in music therapy. So it was a 4-year accredited program. After we completed the classes, we then had to do 1,200 hours of clinical work in an internship. And then after the internship, you sit for a board certification exam that, tests your knowledge and your ability as a music therapist. And then after you are certified, you are allowed to then call yourself a music therapist and practice music therapy. For neurologic music therapy specifically, that is a separate training program that you go through. Caitlin, I can't seem to remember how many hours. Oh, it's 36. I have my certificate up on the wall behind me. It's 36 hours to complete that training.
So it's a lot, but it's very doable.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Said they are, hang on one second. There it is in the chat, and there's Caitlin's email. I have encountered someone with a TBI who said they're unable to tolerate any music of any kind. Is there a way to work on that? And kind of parlaying on that question, I have someone that now is able to hear a song one time and knows every word, but has terrible vision and has to have vision therapy done. You know, he's older, he's not wanting to do it. But the point is, he can hear a song and he knows every word, like every single word one time through. And he thinks it's from his multiple concussions, which I wouldn't doubt.
Well, I can touch on the, so I think when you think about music, and we've talked about how it's kind of like it's a pretty powerful stimulus in a sense, like there's a lot from a neural level that's happening. So I do find that with some individuals that if there is a kind of sensory overload or, music can provide kind of maybe even a too strong of an auditory stimulus, that could happen. I think it's quite rare, but I have experienced people where they're not at a point where you could actually introduce the full music capacity of, you think like the guitar has a really vibrant, really loud sound. So in that case, to kind of circumvent, oftentimes that doesn't mean they wouldn't benefit from the components of music like rhythm. You might just have to be creative in the application of it. So maybe it's that you're using, a lower drum tone, or you're using kind of a better metronome sound that's helping so it's not so overstimulating.
Interesting.
And I don't know in regard, I mean, I kind of wish I had that ability to like listen to a song and just know all the lyrics. So if they figure out what happened.
It's actually really, really crazy. Like, and I'm talking new songs, not just like the oldies and things like that.
Right.
It is really, truly crazy. So, all right, we are coming up almost to a full hour here, which is phenomenal. And so, yes, the brain is fascinating. This will be on replay. You have to have a free account because we protect the people that are here, right? That's why we put all of this on the dashboard. I encourage you, please go on and help me shape this specific to music therapy as well. We have speech pathology sections and vision therapy sections now for our symptoms to track. So we can only make it better if you tell us. Two things, and this might be putting our guests on the spot, but again, if you'd like to come back, we'd love to have you, I'm sure. Give us a thumbs up. And also, what if we did an actual session, right? Like we did at-home vision therapy tests to assess, do you need to have vision therapy? So is there some way we could do maybe a down and dirty, short and sweet? Let's put them through the ringer. Let's test everybody live. It's a good group. You can see they want this help. And so if that's what we all want, let's do it. And I'll get with the ladies and reschedule it. And then the other thing too is that companies have started to reach out to me to ask me if you, my community that are helping Power of Patients reshape clinical trials for you all, want to start participating. So it is for you that I am doing this. So you, in order to have access to these trials that are coming up, one is to actually be able to be interviewed by the Center for Medicaid Services, and they pay you. And they want to know what happened, what went wrong in your outpatient care. And this is your chance to tell them, like, I dumped on them, so yeah. So I can't help but encourage you more and more and more. Please go and register if you haven't, because this is where people will get access to these trials. And so, I'm making this happen for you all. Are there, hang on, one more or two more questions, dropping a quick shortcut. Berkeley, there's somebody, Suzanne. Oh yeah, Suzanne, I remember. All right, that's all I have. Is there anything else? You're getting lots of thank yous, ladies, and hearts. All right, this will be online on the dashboard. Again, you can see it there. It usually takes me probably by tomorrow. It should be up. And I will also pass out all the contact info for our guests as well. All right, without any further ados, thank you, everybody. Ladies, thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
PA. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
looking
you.
those up.
Yep.
Yeah. And thank you very much, Lynn. Everything you're doing is phenomenal, and the symptom tracker has been so helpful for our family members. Like, they're tracking the symptoms.
You know what? California, Daniel, California has now superseded all the other states with the total number of people.
That's right.
I'm going to start sharing, but Oregon's going to start kicking your butt.
Well, yeah, we gotta double up. We gotta double up, double down.
Double down, double down. All right, everybody. Stephen, you got to get the woman that you told us last time. She became a musician after her head injury. She was not musically inclined, and now she has like music contracts and things like that. So I'll see if we can get Stephen to like bring her on and just talk about it. How crazy is that, right? All right. Again, I'm going to sign this all off. Thank you, ladies. This was fabulous.
Bye.
Bye.